Breaking down Arizona football's schedule, there are a couple interesting must-wins for the Wildcats, or a must-split. How about that?
You are Locked On Wildcats, your daily podcast on the Arizona Wildcats. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for keeping it Locked On Wildcats. I'm your host, Mike Luke. And all right, now this show is brought to you by FanDuel. Check it out. Again, FanDuel, you know the drill. All kinds of good stuff at FanDuel. FanDuel.com. You will thank me later. Again, place to bet, all of the good stuff. All right, now we're going to talk Arizona football, their schedule, games that we need to keep, games that we should all keep an eye on, and all of that good stuff. I think the first and foremost is Arizona, your first two games of the season, you got New Mexico and you got NAU. You should blast both of those teams. Those should be absolute destructions. And if it's not, then obviously we are going to have to recalibrate some expectations. But joking aside, I expect those both to be easy wins for the Wildcats. But then it's going to be interesting because you have your toughest stretch of the season to begin the with Kansas. You got at Kansas State and you've got at Utah, and those are the games that we are going to really hit on here, and because I think that they're very important. With Kansas State and Utah, it's this: you obviously want to be able to beat both of these teams, but you got to get a split. Now, if you could prefer to win one game, you would prefer to beat Utah. Because obviously Utah is a conference game. Kansas State, the game was scheduled before, so that is not a conference game. But there's obviously, with that, you got to obviously keep an eye on that as well. Now, with Kansas State, let's talk a little bit about that game. That's going to be a game of Friday night in Manhattan, and I think that it's going to be interesting to see what exactly does transpire there, because Kansas State's good. Their defense is really good. I think we know that. And then obviously you've got really good running backs. You got really good running backs. You also have a player in. You also have a player in Avery Johnson that is probably going to be one of the better players in the conference if he can reach his potential. Everyone loves Avery Johnson, and I think that there's reason to understand it. I mean, again, he was a high 4-star kid. He's very fast, and I think his arm is somewhat underrated. And not only is it underrated, it is I think that there's a lot to like. I think that he can be a Sunday football player. So we will see how that one does play out. But overall, Kansas State is solid. You don't essentially run off a guy like Will Howard, who's good enough to go to Ohio State, without having a real plan of succession, what that is, and that's obviously Avery Johnson. Now, when it comes to the running game, you've obviously got two good backs there, obviously a transfer from Colorado as well. So we will see. This is going to be a tough game. It's going to be obviously in Manhattan. I will be there. But I think this is a game that Arizona can definitely win. Now, with the big thing with Arizona football is that you can definitely get to the college football playoffs with 2 losses, and I think that is a big part of it. You're probably going to have 2 losses when you get to. But where can those losses come from? And that's why I think that it is imperative that Arizona at least splits these first 2 games. Because if you don't split those first 2 games, if you lose both of them, then you have a lot of pressure to win out at that point. And if you win out, then I think that obviously you need that to be able to you obviously need that to happen. Now with Utah, then it becomes a little bit interesting, because with Utah, listen, they've got probably the best defense in the Big 12, and if it's not the best defense in the Big 12, it is right there. And I think a big part of that is that you know what you can get, you know what you're getting from that squad. They're going to be tough. They're going to be relentless on defense, and I think they're banking on Cam Rising being good. Again, I don't know for a fact that Cam Rising is going to be good. I think it's difficult to sit here and say that he is going to be good because he didn't play. He hasn't played, and he hasn't played in 2 years. When he does play, he's super. There's a lot of moxie to his game. He's very, he's good, and also he's also a player that is I think it's pretty much fair to say that you can win a lot of games with him, but we didn't see him last year, so who knows exactly how that one is going to play out. We shall see. But those are the 2 games in Arizona, and they're going to be road games as well. Obviously, I would prefer that Arizona beats Utah, but you got to get one of those games because then you don't really have any margin for error, and you do have some tough teams that can beat you after that. And I think that's where, if you're an Arizona fan, that's essentially what you're looking at. Now, after that, I think it's fascinating because you got some games that I think that you should be able to win. You got Texas Tech, then you've got Texas Tech, then you've got BYU, and I think with both of those teams, listen. Texas Tech, you should be able to beat. Arizona's just got better football players than Texas Tech. And BYU, it's in Provo, so that obviously gives you a little bit of pause, but it's also a game that I think that Arizona fans should expect to be able to get a victory out of because, again, they are picked to finish as one of the very worst teams in the conference. It does feel weird. Saying that, but that just kind of is what it is. Then you've got, obviously, after that, you got Colorado. Everybody likes obviously Deion Sanders is the he's the guy that everybody's talking about in college football. You've got a lot of distractions going on there. Obviously, Shiloh Sanders, that whole USA Today expose was put out there where he did a lot of stuff, and Deion essentially is trying to kind of run from it. But Colorado does have a lot of talent. My question for Colorado, and I'm glad that Arizona gets them at home, but my question about Colorado is, will they become dysfunctional the second that things start going poorly? Because that's been something that we've seen from these players, that when things start going poorly, they start blaming other people. And I think, and especially with Deion, I think is kind of that same way as well. I don't know that there's a lot of, how do I put this, maturity on that team or in that coaching staff. Arizona goes to Colorado, Colorado comes here. Arizona, in my opinion, should be able to win that game. I think that Arizona just has better players. Now, again, there's certain positions that Colorado's probably better at, but it's probably a deeper wide receiver unit, but I'll take Arizona's team, and I'll take Arizona at home. Arizona should be able to win that game. So that kind of gets you to the halfway mark of the season. And at that point, I'd like Arizona to be able to have only, if possible, one loss. Because again, this is where it kind of comes down to for me. If Arizona needs to, I think Arizona needs to be able to get into the college football playoffs this year. And if Arizona can get into the college football playoffs, then it makes it a lot easier for Arizona to be able to look forward and say that, things are headed in the right direction, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But you can't, that's why I keep coming back to that. You can't drop both of those games. You've got to be able to either beat Kansas State or Utah. Again, preferably Utah, but it's got to be one of those 2 games. And if Arizona can get that, then I think you feel like you're in pretty good shape because the rest of the schedule I think is very manageable. Those two games are going to be obviously difficult for the Wildcats, but either way, like we said, need a split. So we're going to break down the rest of the schedule and what it all means. But first, FanDuel, check it out. FanDuel.com. All kinds of really, really good stuff at FanDuel. And the great thing about it, too, is that you can bet on games. You got football here. You got basketball right around the corner, obviously. Check it out. FanDuel is here to help you. They want you to be able to have a good time with all of this. So, again, check it out, FanDuel. Another one of these ones where you will thank me later. But, again, put down a little bit of money, get some action in the game, and it becomes a lot more enjoyable after that. So again, FanDuel.com, another one of these ones that, sports is here, or big time sports is here. Make it even more enjoyable with a little bit of skin in the game. Thanks for keeping it locked on Wildcats and making this your first listen of the day. I am your host, Mike Luke. All right, now let's talk a little bit about going forward then with the second half of this schedule. We talked about it. You should be able to beat the snot out of New Mexico. You should be able to beat the snot out of NAU, obviously. And then when it comes down to it, just need a split. Don't care how it happened. But if you beat Utah or you beat Kansas State, then I think that you're sitting very, very good with all of this. So again, we will find this out. We'll see how this does play. So a big part of this now is what is the next step for Arizona football when it comes to the schedule, and that's where we're going to talk about now. So then you got West Virginia. West Virginia would be a game I'd be very worried about if that was in Morgantown, because again, it's kind of like UCF. And then it's a difficult place to play. It's a long travel. You're traveling across the country. But there are some things to like about West Virginia. You've obviously, it's basically been a solid team. You come in here, though, Arizona, in my opinion, should be able to beat West Virginia, being they're coming in here. Then you got at UCF. At UCF is a game that worries me and worries me a great deal. You're going there. It's the space game, so generally they do not lose the space game, and that is Gus Malzahn has done a very, very good job, and not only does Gus Malzahn do a good job, KJ Jefferson though is KJ Jefferson is a guy who can move around. He showed at Arkansas that he's a good football player, and I think you're going to see the most out of him. You also have very good skill position players. You're traveling across the country, and I think it's something that you've got to take into account. I think that Arizona, I think there's a real chance that Arizona is going to lose that game because again, UCF is good. You are traveling across the country. Nobody likes to make that trip, and so again, that's a loss. I'm putting that at 2 losses at this point. Then I think Arizona needs to win out. Listen, you get Houston. That's at home. Arizona needs to beat Houston. It's at home. I get that Houston has had some talent over the years, but Ed Oliver not walking through that door, and they are coming here. That's another thing. Arizona's got to be able to protect home because you got some difficult road games, which we've already broke down, but Arizona's got to be able to take care of business there. And then you've got after that, you got TCU. TCU is a little bit of a trap game for me because again, Sonny Dykes is a really good coach. They're a year removed from being being in the national championship game, so you got to remember that. But they were not very good last year, obviously. And I think that, Arizona's going to that. Arizona's going there. Arizona should be able to beat TCU, though. I am banking on an Arizona win over the Horned Frogs. But, again, don't love it, mainly because I think that TCU is probably a little bit underrated. And I think that they have a coaching staff that, knows what they're doing. And it's the game before ASU. So that worries me. But those are wins that I think are games that Arizona should be able to win. Then you got ASU. Listen, with ASU, I don't think you're watching in this ASU team and saying that they're good, but I do expect them to be better than last year. Now, again, they've had some tough news. Obviously, they've dealt with some injuries on the D line. Williams, or a nickelback, announced his retirement, which is a big-time loss for ASU. But Arizona's better. Arizona's better across the board. I'm not sure if you were look at the 22-man roster, which players at ASU would start at Arizona. And I think it's probably a very, very limited group of players. You may be the center. Maybe a couple guys on defense, maybe Jordan Tyson, I don't know, but overall, this is not a very talented team. When you look at Arizona compared to them, I think Arizona should beat the crap out of ASU. Now, I get that it's a rivalry game, I get all of that, but I still believe that sometimes talent wins out, and Arizona just has more talented players. So that's where I'm at. I believe that Arizona should be able to get through this season with only two losses. I do. I think you got two. And if that's the case, then I think you're looking at the college football playoffs. I really do. And who knows? Maybe you win a game. Maybe you win a couple games. Who knows? But that to me is the bare minimum. You got to be able to get 2 wins. And if you can get 2 wins, then I think that you feel pretty good about, 2 losses. I think you feel pretty good about where you are if you're the Wildcats and this season under Brent Brennan, because again, this is a program that needs to win now. Again, we talked about it. You're probably not going to be getting a T-Mac, a Jonas Avenea, players like that. So you got to be able to capitalize. You got to be able to strike while the iron is hot. And I think this coaching staff knows that. So again, we'll see how this all plays out. But overall, that's kind of where I'm at with this squad. And that's, looking at it now. Let's look at some of these games. Which ones are games that, could be a little bit more difficult than maybe some people think. And, I think that, listen, everybody knows that you got New Mexico, Northern Arizona. Those are games those are not trap games. Those should not be difficult. At BYU worries me a little bit, not because BYU is good. They're not good. But again, it's in Provo. Probably not a game that you can just chalk down as a sure win, even though you should be able to win that game. You should be able to win that game easily. But again, you're traveling to Provo. Got to keep that in mind. Colorado, not many people expect a ton out of Colorado, and I don't either. But you also got to sit here and say that Colorado is a very talented football program. Listen, Shedeur Sanders is very, very good. You can watch him for 5 seconds and you can see that. And the wide receiving core, LaJonte Webster, a Jimmy Horn, a Travis Hunter. Obviously, those are all really, really good football players. So you got to be able to keep that in mind. I think you take a step back at the running back. I don't know. And then on the O-line, it can't be any worse than it was last year. So you got to think about that. But that's obviously the question. And then on defense, listen, you brought in a lot better. You got better players on defense. You got better players across the board. When you bring in BJ Green, when you bring in some of the dudes like from Pittsburgh, and at the linebacker spot, and then obviously in the secondary, you still have Travis Hunter. There's a lot of talent there. That said, I think it's also going to be dysfunctional talent. I think that Arizona should be able to win that game, but Colorado will not be an easy game. I'm not, like I said, I'm not sitting here breaking any news on that one. We talked about it a great deal with UCF. UCF is interesting because with UCF, it's a tough place to play. You got a lot of talent. That game, I think, is going to be a loss for Arizona. I'd love to be wrong, but that game, if I were to look at it, I'm thinking that's a loss. And then after that, like I said, I think TCU is a game that could be a little bit more difficult than maybe some people imagine. But that's kind of what I'm looking at. And like I said, when it comes down to it, this season comes down to one thing for me, and we're going to talk about that. But first, Gametime. Check it out. Download the Gametime app. Use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, the great thing with Gametime is, and it's very, very simple, is that you can get tickets at the last minute, and you can get these tickets lowest price guaranteed, all kinds of really, really good stuff. And I think the thing about it is with Gametime that with Gametime, they're gonna be able to help you. There's a lot of times when you're kind of scrambling at the last second and you're thinking to yourself, man, this is gonna be difficult for me. But Gametime, they have your back. Download the Gametime app today. Use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, check it out, Gametime. Thanks for keeping it locked on Wildcats. I'm your host, Mike Luke. Now, let's talk a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about what we got going on here at as far as what the season is. Again, 9 wins. 9 wins is my bare minimum. It's got to be 9 wins. I don't care how you get there. It's got to be 9 wins, because I think if it's 9 wins, then you're then it's a little bit you can continue to build on that, and that's kind of that's the good thing about it. And with 9 wins, you can also build on something that Arizona's had a difficult time with in the past, being able to string together really good seasons in a row. It always seems like, there's always something, what's the next thing to fall, or what's the next, issue that somebody's going to have with Arizona. It is what it is. You got to be able to win. You got to be able to win now. There's some good, like I said, there's a good roster. It's a loaded roster, and again, you should be able to do that. Again, I'm not asking you to win the college football playoffs. I'm not asking you to win the national championship, but I am asking you to take advantage of a roster that you're probably not going to have intact next year. So again, you got to check. I think you got to do it. And with Noah Fafita, I think with Noah Fafita, that's kind of where it's, you got a really good quarterback. You know that you got the best wide receiver in college football. Take advantage of it. Take advantage of it. All of these games, there's no game on the schedule where you're like, all right, Arizona has no chance of winning that. We've gone through a lot of years in the past where you looked at the schedule and you said, okay, Arizona has no chance of winning that. So you got to keep that one in mind. But so that's kind of where it's at. Now, with Arizona, and Brent Brennan, we're going to find out a lot about Brent Brennan this year. We really are. We're going to find out what exactly Brent Brennan is as a head coach with a lot of talent. We've seen him be resourceful at San Jose State, but it's also a lot different, though, if you're doing that at a team that, with top 25 talent or top 25 expectations, with 3 or 4 guys that are, amongst the best players in college football and 3 first-round picks. He hasn't coached players like this before. He hasn't coached players of this caliber, so we'll see exactly what he can do. I think he's going to do just fine, but you also don't know until you see it. I do feel comfortable, though, having him as the coach, mainly because I think it would be a little bit more difficult if you were just bringing in a coach on his first time and he's having to deal with this type of talent. That's kind of where I think it's at this point. So we will see how this all does play out. But overall, big expectations for the season, and it's a schedule that is not easy, but it's a very navigatable schedule. How about that? And again, Arizona should, in my opinion, be able to take care of business here. So get 9 wins, try to get in the college football playoffs, or at least be lingering around there. And then I think you can continue to use that for recruiting purposes. You're going to continue to recruit Texas. You're going to continue to recruit a lot of different places. So we will see how that plays out. But overall, good stuff. Now, we're going to talk tomorrow about, can Arizona football be better in 2024 than it was in 23? I think there's an interesting case to be made for it. We will see how that does play out, but there are positions, or there are, coaching situations where you're like, all right, a little bit more talent there than maybe the previous coaching staff, or they're able to utilize players in a way that maybe the previous coaching staff couldn't. So again, I think there's a case to be made, and I think it's going to be an exciting one to make. But overall, big time expectations for the U of A this year. Cannot fall flat on your face. Have to be able to take advantage of this while the time is here. And then we're also going to talk a little bit Arizona point guard recruiting if we have some time, because, again, Tommy Lloyd got to be able to get another point guard in here as well. But as always, thanks for making Locked On Wildcats your first listen of the day. Bear down, back the A, and we will be back with you tomorrow. Have an absolute great rest of your day.